Good morning, UCC. Happy Sunday. It was gross outside yesterday. A lot of events, beautiful day, but then it just had this muggy overcast. Yesterday was an interesting day, so story time. My wife and I got our 4-year-old cat professionally groomed for the first time, and it was nerve-wracking because she's a long-haired cat, and it's hard to find somewhere in Grand Rapids that will do cats, and we sort of discovered why. So long story short, we dropped our cat off. 10 minutes down the road, we get a call saying, so we're halfway done, and basically she was doing perfectly fine, and I'm gonna keep my opinions aside, but she freaked out because they have one big room that they do all the groomings in simultaneously. So as they were working on our cat, they brought a dog in. I'm not going to pass judgment, but not something I would do. And long story short, we only had to pay $50, but she's a long-haired cat, so half of her body is shaved, and the other half is just long. And she's just looking at us at home like, our thing is done. You know, I'm not going to talk to you for a solid week. But she's coming around, but my wife, we had to give her a bath. She was a hot mess. My wife was crying. She's like, yeah, she's not gonna love us anymore. But yeah, that was an experience. But yeah, weather's getting warmer. People are going outside. Hope you guys had a great week. That was what I was playing in the beginning. This chord progression was actually from a Christopher Nolan movie, Inception by Hans Zimmer. Beautiful, just simple chord progression. But we're going to start this morning off with two pieces, 3:18, We Would Be One, followed by 10:25, When Will the Fighting Cease? we would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for the meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free. When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries. Da pacem Domine, da pacem Domine, in diebus nostris, in diebus nostris.
Oh, Chris's introduction always gives me a little lift. I'm a cat owner, so I know what you're talking about. I had a cat that every time I took her to the vet, we had to sedate her. So, okay, well, good morning. Welcome to UUCC. I'm David Sonical, lay leader for this service, and I'm happy to see everyone here, whether in the sanctuary or joining us on Zoom or Facebook. So, some of you know I'm inclined to do this little, tickle your funny bone thing at the beginning of a service that I lead. And right now, in light of the current news, I don't feel so humorous. So we all know about, Miriam always cautions me about our major factotum here, about getting too political from the podium. But, yeah. But, concerning a certain former holder of high office, I think probably a lot of us think that justice was done. So now I think we're going to hear the word justice, the word bandied about from here to eternity, from one extreme to the other, from now through the election. So one might want to look for saner voices about such a subject. So some of you know that I am a student of the philosophy of Stoicism. An ancient tradition goes back 300 years and more before the Christian era. And it's had kind of a renaissance in recent years. There's been a lot of books published on Stoicism, and one of those authors is a young man named Ryan Holiday. His book, The Daily Stoic, is in my hands almost every day. He also has a blog by the same title, and I read that every day as well. So he's about to publish a book called Right Thing, Right Now, Good Values, Good Character, Good Deeds. And here is what he says about justice. The word justice is now often associated with courts, lawsuits, prosecutors, and defenders, judges, and juries. We debate the meaning of justice, the functioning of the legal system, its complexities, its flaws, ambiguities, limitations, and inconsistencies. We get bombarded by the news cycle of stories of injustice, verdicts which were fair or unfair, and people who did or didn't get the justice they deserve. But the Stoics understood justice differently, not simply as a noun, but also as a verb. Not something we get, but something we do. Not something we demand from other people, but something we demand of ourselves. That's why the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." This is one of the key aims of his book, to rescue justice from its narrow legalistic confines and reestablish it as the actions we take, the choices we make, the standards we hold ourselves to, the way we treat people, the things we care about, the difference we make for people, the opportunities we accept and turn down, the right thing right now. By reclaiming justice as something that we do instead of something done to us, it becomes a stronghold in the storm, a guiding light out of the dark. By committing to doing the right thing here and now, we create for ourselves an internal compass that guides and directs us home. That's what justice was for Marcus Aurelius, Martin Luther King Jr., Emmeline Pankhurst, Jimmy Carter, Sojourner Truth, and my words, other champions of justice. Okay, back to the order of service. If you're in the sanctuary, be aware that this service is live on social media. Tables at the back are available if you prefer not to appear on camera. Please refrain from talking during the live session to avoid unintentional broadcasting, and switch your cell phones to airplane mode for smooth streaming. For visitors, feel free to explore literature about our UU faith in the entrance and community room. To our Facebook viewers, join our Zoom coffee hour after the service. Find the link in the comments section. Discover more about our church programs for children and youth, and weekly opportunities to connect with us on our website, uucommunitychurch.org. Located on Shaver Road in Portage, Michigan, our church on ancestral lands of the Peoria and Potawatomi people proudly displays a rainbow flag and Black Lives Matter sign, symbolizing our inclusive community dedicated to creating a just and sustainable world. Usually we have our minister, Reverend G. Ludwig McCartney, with us, but today we welcome back Mr. Levi Rickert, and I'll give you more of an introduction later on. Finally, heartfelt thanks to everyone contributing to the morning service, our greeters, musician, tech team, coffee hosts, RE volunteers, the choir. We're back in action. We're going to sing next week. And each one of you, your presence and contributions are truly appreciated. Announcements. You have a chance to make history. Today at Portage's First Pride celebration from 12:30 to 3 p.m. at the Portage United Church of Christ on Millam Avenue. UUCC is a co-host of this historic event, so we hope that many of you will attend this family-friendly potluck picnic and show your support for LGBTQIA+ equity and inclusion in our community. Next Sunday, June 9th, is a big day at UUCC. We will hold a welcoming ceremony for our newest members. We will recognize several of our outstanding volunteers. We will have a soup luncheon after the service to support the Youth Fund, and at 11:15 a.m., we will hold our annual meeting. All voting members are encouraged to attend. Childcare will be provided. Have you ordered a new UUCC t-shirt yet? All the cool folks at UUCC will be sporting these snazzy sunshine yellow tees in the coming weeks. You know you want one. There are order forms in the back by the welcome table, or you can find an online order at the weekly email. And, okay, time to light the chalice. On this day around the world, Unitarian Universalists light the chalice. We are truth seekers. We seek a truth that is so strong it can withstand our questioning and even our doubts. The flame reminds us of what we have in common here, and so we bring it to life. In the light of truth and the one defend, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. And we have a reading for today called Eagle Poem by Joe Harjo, a poet laureate of the United States from 2019 to 2022, and a member of the Muskogee Nation. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know, except in moments steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky, in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born, and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty.
For you can see me in your eyes when they are mirrored by a friend. There is no end to the circle, no end. There is no end to life, there is no end. For I am a power to begin. I dream and bring new birth what's never been. There is no end to the freedom, no end. There is no end to life, there is no end. There is no end to the circle, no end. There is no end to life, there is no end.
We are pleased to welcome back Mr. Levi Rickert, a tribal citizen of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, who is an award-winning Native American journalist who started Native News Online and Tribal Business News. Since its inception in February 2011, Native News Online has become one of the most read and trusted Native American daily news outlets across the country. Mr. Rickert hosts Native News Online's weekly Native Bidaske, which spotlights those making news and leading changes in Indian country. Additionally, Mr. Rickert hosts the Hope Plus Healing podcast in conjunction with the National Indian Health Board. Welcome, Mr. Rickert.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's a special day, not just because I'm here, but I'll tell you why it's special. 100 years ago today, President Calvin Coolidge signed the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, June 2nd, 1924. So today, we are observing the centennial of Indian citizenship. Now, those of you who may be students of history will recall, this was actually quite a momentous occasion. Because as I wrote in an editorial that was posted this morning, it was kind of the United States way of saying, we're no longer going to kill Indians. Because all those years, and there have been different policies, different segments of history where they treated us differently. And the Indian Wars continued till about 1900. And it was at the point where in 1906, Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, wrote to Edward S. Curtis, who had, some of you will remember, had gone around the country taking over 40,000 pictures of Native Americans, particularly in the West and in Alaska. And what Roosevelt wrote to Curtis was, thank you for doing this. I'm putting my own words. Because this is a vanishing race of people. They're not going to be here very long. Because history records, and depending on what count you read, there were 15, I've heard as high as 60, maybe 80 million people pre-European contact on this continent. By the time the Citizenship Act was signed by President Coolidge 100 years ago today, there were only 300,000 Native Americans. My grandparents, who were not married then, they got married in 1927, but Ellen Moore and Levi Whitepigeon, I've named that to my grandfather, they were alive then. They were 2 of the 300,000. So I have an editorial that's in Native News Online today, Reflections of the Indian Citizenship Act. I would like you to read it. We also, a couple comments though. Amazingly enough, Native Americans have fought pre-citizenship. They fought in every battle, starting with Revolutionary War. There was I think it was called Company K of Native Americans from this state, particularly Ottawa or Odawa, and a contingency out of Mount Pleasant, the Saginaw Chippewa, who fought in the Civil War. And I just find that amazing. So sometimes I've often asked, how is it, and even today, if you read what the Pentagon puts out, Native Americans on a per capita basis serve in the U.S. military, U.S. Armed Forces, more than any other racial ethnic group in the United States. True story. And I find that amazing. So I've been asked that, we have talked about it among ourselves, and one of the things that comes up is Native Americans are warriors, and we're defending the land. But 2 weeks ago, I was in Rapid City, South Dakota, talking to the chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and he brought a really interesting point up. I had never thought about this. He said, we didn't just fight for the land, but we fought to protect the Constitution of the United States. Why? Because within the Constitution of the United States are treaties. Now, it's been written, there's never been a treaty 100% fulfilled 100%. But I think that's interesting that we have fought to protect the Constitution because of the treaties. Now, this is church, has a special status. I'm not supposed to get political. But I will throw this in. I wish some other people would like to protect the Constitution of the United States. Because there is one man running for president of the United States now who basically wants to alter the Constitution of the United States. So in that regard, Native Americans have it way over the head of him, way past him. So enough politics. Deb Haaland is Secretary of the Interior. She is the first Native American cabinet member serving a secretarial role in the presidential cabinet in the history of the United States. Joe Biden did that. 100 years after the citizenship, Deb Haaland is our Secretary of the Interior, a Native American woman. I think we should clap about that. Lynn Mabarrell. She is a chief of the Mohegan tribe, is the U.S. Treasurer of the United States. Not all dollar bills, because they keep the money fluid, right? But the newer versions have a Native American signature on there as Treasurer of the United States. Chuck Sams, who is a tribal citizen of the Confederate tribes of Umatilla tribes out in Oregon. He is the director of the National Park Service. First time ever a Native American's ever held that post. 100 years after the signing of the Citizenship Act. Now, I will tell you this as publisher, editor of Native News Online, when I came to the realization that we need to do something about this, because I would venture to say 99.8%, maybe even closer to 100% of Americans do not have any clue today is the 100th anniversary. How many of you knew that when you came in here? One person back there. It was on the radio, all right. I've been seeing NPR's done something, some of the AP's run a story. So we're all over it this month. We're going to have a series of commemorations. But back to my point, when I first was saying, we got to do something about this. This is probably back in January, February. And our editorial staff got together, and we were actually using the word celebration. Boy, did we get pushback from tribal leaders. Why are we celebrating this? This was tearing away our sovereignty. So I will say this. Native Americans are not a monolith. I'm a proud citizen of both the United States, and my tribe is the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. I take pride in that. Now, I will confess, I haven't always stood up for the national anthem particularly when my son played basketball. He was a starter on the team, and he's a good kid, good basketball player. But there were things, I was running the North American Indian Center in Grand Rapids at the time. There were things that I was coming aware of, how we were treated. So I must be blunt, I was not feeling it. And there's time I just sat down. So when this quarterback got in trouble and everybody came, what a bad person he was, unpatriotic and all that, I understood it. So sometimes you have to kind of go where you are, inside of yourself. And I'll tell you another story. I was making testimony in 1996 for a Senate committee, Michigan State Senate committee, subcommittee. And the topic really was about Indian casinos, as I recall. There was a state senator, as I was speaking, got redder and redder in his face. He was just mad at me. He did not like anything I was saying. You guys are a good crowd. I don't see any red faces out there. No Redskins, right? That's a joke. So I had introduced myself as a citizen of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, which I typically do. I already was. Dave did a good job of that earlier. And he called me back to the podium. I was a much younger man. He said, "Young man, come back to the podium." Okay. He said, "Do you consider yourself a U.S. citizen. I noticed you gave your tribal citizenship when you introduced yourself. Well, this was kind of cute. I had behind me about 10 or 15 Native Americans, and I said, I know the IRS does. Well, that I think that made his face just one more shade of deeper red. But we are dual citizenship, dual citizens. And one thing that happened at 1924 it was not a magical thing. It didn't cure all the problems. We still have high rates of unemployment, high rates of poverty. We still have voter suppression. There were some states, because voting in the United States is really controlled by states, right? States' rights. They dictate how elections are handled, who can vote. There were some states, Maine and Utah were, I think, the last two states, and Arizona was not too far behind, that allowed, and I think it was Utah, it was 1957, it was court decision said you have to let these Native Americans vote. But this is what I hear even in 2024. When I go to conferences, national conferences on by national Native American organizations. I'm flying out this afternoon to Cherokee, North Carolina. Somebody told me relative Cherokee from the Eastern Band. I'm flying down there this afternoon because they have the National Congress of American Indians starts tomorrow morning. But what I hear at the conferences is this, and I hear it from people from the Native American Rights Fund, that Native Americans many times have to travel up to 100 miles to go vote. I wrote an editorial last cycle. It says, un-American for someone to have to drive 99 miles to go vote. Because what happens is, particularly on reservations where their roads are not like the roads out here, but they are typically not even unpaved, bumpy. And you remember those days when I'm old, so I remember the days when a lot of roads weren't paved in Michigan, and particularly up in Mount Pleasant. It was like you went up there, it was like a washboard road. And when it rains or the snow, it alters the road, and then the guys have to come out with a big grader and grade it down and make it smooth again. But voter suppression. And folks, let me tell you this, it's real in the United States. It's real on Indian reservations. In North Dakota, the legislature passed a bill that basically required that voters had to have ID with a physical address on it. There was a problem. Because the U.S. Postal Service has not given every home on reservations a physical address. They have you see them at apartment or condo complexes, right? You see those, a bunch of mailboxes, right? You can go in and you turn your key and you get your mail. They don't have physical addresses. And what some guys were saying at a recent conference about voter suppression is in South Dakota, these big, burly, can I just say it the way I want to, white guys show up, cowboy hats, and intimidate the living daylights out of their Native American elders. They don't even want to go back and vote. So, whereas 100 years later, I'm happy where we are, but we still have a lot of work to do to overcome a lot of those things I just talked about. I do want to read, if I can find it on my phone here. Let's see here. Secretary Holland, Secretary of the Interior Holland, submitted this essay which you ran today as an exclusive. And this is what she wrote about the 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act. It is difficult for me to order out the fireworks in celebration of the Indian Citizenship Act's centennial. Because my people were here long before the Mayflower, in the Pilgrims, and before the cow was introduced to North America. I learned something when I read that one. We have always been citizens of this continent. Our citizenship runs deep, and in spite of every Indian war, assimilation policy, and outright assault on our land, animals, and ways of life by newcomers, we have persevered. Knowing that my ancestors survived to give me breath, and that my family's customs and traditions have survived through it all, gives me hope that our future generations will also have them to pass down. That's from Secretary Holland. She was talking about the policies of assimilation. And now I'm going to transition over and tell me how many minutes I have left. I'm a talker. I don't want to bore you. I want to talk about boarding schools, Indian boarding schools. And somebody told me today that some of you went over to the Nottawassippi here on Potawatomi recently, I think Thursday, and so you kind of had a crash course. So I'm not gonna get too far into the weeds on that, because I could speak about that for hours. But I will say this: after 3 years ago, Memorial Day weekend, there was an announcement out of Camp Loops, British Columbia, that 215 bodies were discovered in this big, massive grave. Do you remember that? That was a time that I say the world kind of woke up to the fact that we had these Indian boarding schools. And I will say this, and I've said it when I've been on radio, particularly out of Washington, D.C., let's not confuse boarding schools, these Indian boarding schools, with what the wealthy send their kids to boarding schools to get refined and get educated. That was not pleasant. My grandmother, Ellen Moore, went to Genoa Indian boarding school. She had a tattoo on her wrist. And I will tell you this, that I didn't go to a boarding school, nor did my mother go to a boarding school. But we've had to live with they call it historical trauma associated with boarding school. 3 weeks after the mass grave was disclosed, Secretary Holland said to the National Congress of American Indians mid-year conference that she and her indigenous staff wept when they discussed it. She on that day, established the Federal Indian Boarding School Investigative Committee. Gave them 1 year to come up with a report. They came up with a report. They did the best they could to disclose how many boarding schools there were. There's still so much work to be done. Because in 1928, there was a report through the Department of the Interior, but Brookings Institution actually did it for the Department of the Interior by a gentleman by the name of, I can't think of his first name, but his last name was Merriam. It's called the Merriam Report. Back then they said the record keeping was so poor that they had no idea what was going on. And they described how kids were starving in these schools. And I think about it in terms of time, 1928, that's 1 year before the Depression, right? Because my mom grew up in the Depression. How many have parents that grew up in the Depression or grandparents that they were poor? My grandfather, Levi Whitepigeon, had 10 children. One passed away in infancy, but so there were 9. So they had a lot of mouths to feed during the Depression. So I think about, man, if it was bad before the Depression, what was it like during the Depression for these kids in these Indian boarding schools. Secretary Holland established what she called the Road to Healing. And the Road to Healing was 12 stops across the United States where she and Assistant Secretary Brian Newland, who is a member of the Bay Mills Indian community up at Brumley, Michigan, they went to to various locations, took testimony from survivors and descendants of the survivors in Indian boarding schools. I'm happy to report Native News Online attended every single one of those listening sessions. I went to 11 of 12. And the only reason I couldn't go to the one is my brother passed away. And he passed away on Tuesday. The listening session was going to be on Saturday, and I just could not leave my family. So we sent a reporter. But I went around the United States. I listened to the stories of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The Washington Post this past Wednesday, you really owe it to yourself to get online and read this article. They really got into the sexual abuse more than we did. And it's quite amazing when you heard the testimonies of the elders who had gone through these traumatic experiences. They were pretty consistent wherever you went, whatever region you are in the United States. Physical, emotional, sexual abuse. Now, one particular man stands out, and he's actually cited in the Washington Post article. Because I actually saw, he was describing getting beat by the Jesus rope. Now, I'm in church, so I'm going to say a Jesus rope. Now, let me give you the setting. Kids came to the boarding schools, they're going to bed, they were crying late at night. They were crying because they missed their parents. Parents, plural. Now, I will say this. The only thing I can equate to that is when I was 5 years old, my mother had cancer. I was sent for 2 weeks to my stepfather's family up in Shepherd, Michigan. 2 weeks. I remember, and I'm going to tell you, these people were nice to me. Fed me, made sure I was clean, bought me a pair of shoes, a new pair of shoes. Nice to me. But I remember going, just having this like hurt, the separation, the loneliness I was feeling because my mom was not there. And when you're 5, you really don't know what's going on. You know, you might hear the word cancer. But I was so hurt, so lonely. And then one Friday, I still remember, it was a February day. I have a pretty good memory. The good Lord in heaven, the Creator, gave me a good memory. I remember it was a February day, my grandfather, Levi White Pigeon, came and got me. He walked out to his car, and you know how in the late afternoon in February, they got the clouds, but you got some like red sky coming through the clouds. I remember that. And I remember my grandfather saying, I'm picking you up. Everything's going to be okay. So I think about that, and I'm going to call it anguish because it was anguish. I can speak for myself. I was in pain. I was separated from my mother. But can you imagine being in a boarding school, months on end, separated from your parents? And all in the name of assimilation. Kill the man, kill the Indian, save the man. That was the mantra. Meaning, not kill us literally, but strip us of that culture, strip us of that Indian. Wash their mouth out with soap. for speaking the native tongue. Ironically enough, I'm glad it didn't work in Navajo Nation, because the Navajo Nation produced code talkers that helped save democracy in the South Pacific. True story. So I'm happy that they were not successful. But here these kids are crying. Instead of the priest or nun saying, little Johnny, here's a cookie, here's some milk, go to bed, things are going to be okay in the morning, they got beat. And this man described out there at one of these Road to Healing out in Tulalip, Washington, how they had a choice between this board with holes in it, a strap looked like a razor strap, or what they called the Jesus rope. And it looked like, because he brought these replicas, he's going, this is how I remember it. So it was like a clothesline with beads on it. So after he got as he was speaking, people were literally tears on their eyes. I'm taking photos, tears coming down my face. I look over, I saw this lady from the Washington Post, tears in her eyes. So I'm so happy she captured that in the Washington Post, the Jesus rope. So I said, afterward, I said, what, I got to talk to you. I told him who I was. And he said, you know how like Jesus got beat so bad? How they describe in the Bible? They open up his skin. That's what happened. These kids would just get beat so much, tore open the skin with those beads on that rope. And I'm going to say this. I'm in church now. How evil is that? Call it the Jesus rope. And I don't even say this to be dramatic, because I'm telling you, this is what was said. This is what these kids endured. Beatings instead of love. And I say that because in any one of our lives as human beings, as we grow, we interact with our family, our friends, the interpersonal relationships are so critical. So critical. Good or bad, but you know them. Kids would come home from Indian boarding schools and they had not grown with them. Some of these kids were gone for 8, 10 years. Can you imagine being separated from your mother and then all of a sudden have to go back and everything's great? You don't even know them. You don't know them. You know them as your mother, but you don't really know them because you didn't develop together. You didn't have the interpersonal relationships. And because of that, even today, Native Americans suffer. Every single, and as Secretary Holland and Assistant Secretary Newland have said numerous times, every Native American family in America suffers the historical trauma associated with boarding school. Happened in my family. My grandmother, as I knew her, was a very loving person. She passed away when I was, I think, my early 30s, and she was 89. I love that woman. I love my grandfather, Levi Rickert, because they were wonderful people. But I'll tell you this, and Secretary Holland has said this, now that we're studying this, you go back in your family and go, that's why that happened. That southern anger that we get as Native people. Because I've gotten it. I talked to my son just recently. He has had it. We're trying to overcome these things. But that southern anger is, you're mad, you don't even know why you're mad, but it's like that something in our DNA that is passed down from one generation to the next. It's trauma, historical trauma. So I didn't come here to really preach at you and tell you how bad life was for Native people, but that is part of our history. Part of our history. Native News Online produced a book, and we're actually sold out. But if you guys want a copy, it's $25. They'll be available in, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So they're on order right now. But it's very popular, and we probably should have ordered more. I know we should have ordered more, but we went through them just like that and because people want to know about what happened in Indian boarding schools. And we say this, I like to end with a very high note, and I'll speak personally. Even with the trauma that's been in my family, God has been good to my family. I know that. I had two of the most beautiful grandparents, Levi and Ellen White Pigeon. I mentioned them in my editorial because they were alive in 1924. But I can't think of two people who taught me more, not even to be Native American in the traditional sense, ceremonial, because they're apostolic Pentecostal people. But they taught me and my siblings, their grandchildren, my aunts and my uncles, to love each other. And what a beautiful thing the word love is. I've seen in some of your hymns, some of your sayings already today. Wouldn't it be great if we could just all get along? We live in a society where we are so partisan. I think, I'm from Grand Rapids. Jerry Ford was our congressman when I was a kid. 25 years he served in Congress. But he was not nasty. He was not a nasty partisan. He could get together with Tip O'Neill, go out on the golf course, and cut deals. We don't have that anymore. And what really amazes me about America is this. The polls will show that depending on which one you read, maybe 10, 15% at the most, think Congress is doing what they're supposed to be doing. But yet, during re-election time, about 92% get reelected. So go figure that one out. So we need to have these kind of discussions, like, if we're going to make a change, maybe we need to change the people who are going there to represent, because going to represent their constituents in Washington does not mean they should be up in New York outside the trial, okay? I'm trying to be good today, I'm sorry. but that's not doing the work of their constituents, supporting a felon. So what can I leave you with? Uplifting. God is love. We all should love one another. So thank you very much. Chimigwich, see you. Let me know if you want this book. You can reach out to whoever, Joe, somebody, and they'll know how to get a hold of me. So is this my water? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for your message, Mr. Rickert. This is Generosity Sunday for June. So we give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe we can transform this hurting world. We give with the faith that together we have enough. If you would like to contribute to our special offering for the American Indian College Fund, there are a few ways to give. You can place a check made out to UCC with Generosity Sunday in the memo line in the offering basket today or anytime in June. You can also mail your check to our building. If you prefer to use a debit or credit card, give online using the church website at the Vance app on your phone. Be sure to choose Generosity Sunday in the menu. And if you prefer to give cash, we will be donating all cash and loose change in the offering plate today to the College Fund.
Return, return, return to the womb of the mother. Return, 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 return to the love of each other. Return, return, return to the love of the earth.
And it's time to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. Hearts until they get together again. And our closing words for today are by Reverend Clyde Grubbs, UU minister whose Native American heritage at Texas Cherokee informs his spiritual understanding and practice. Remember as you leave this gathered community, remember that we are all made as the same stuff as the stars, that we are all connected and intimately related to the eternity of all that is and all that ever will be. May you be blessed with the spirit of life, which is love, with the aspirations of this community, which are based on hope, and with possibilities made whole through witness and practice. Go in peace, walk in joy. Okay, we will have a